Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. Each week we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're going to be focusing on horror subgenres and how they've changed over time. Hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening. So now we are moving on to our second episode in our mini-series about haunted house movies. And we are looking into ways that people have made haunted house movies interesting over the years. I feel like haunted house movies aren't as much of a narrative, like when we told the story of slashers or told the story of how zombie movies developed over time. But I do think there are some things that we're going to find along the way that are like kind of common tropes. But I think we also see a lot of kind of the other or influences of other horror movies being brought out into haunted house movies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Well,
So,
I don't think so. Yes, that makes sense. Sorry.
But yeah, so it's kind of a different way to talk about the movies, but some of the things that I think will be interesting to focus on are what we talked about last week. So why are the people stuck in the house? Like, what's their motivation to be there? What is the source of danger? How are the people being affected? And then what techniques does the director use to create fear? And those are all things that I think will kind of help us get a handle on what makes the movies that we watch in the haunted house genre interesting or noteworthy. But it'll also be kind of a good jumping off point into talking about how they relate to other movies that were happening at the time. And so this week we're going to start with the oldest one that we're going to do in our haunted house miniseries, and that is House on Haunted Hill from 1959.
So glad you picked this one out.
Had you seen it?
No.
Okay, cool. I didn't think so. This is one that is kind of special to me because a really long time ago, I bought a two-sided DVD that on one side was Night of the Living Dead and on the other side was House on Haunted Hill. Ooh. And so I will always kind of have like the two of those tied together in my memory as being like old horror movies that I really enjoyed.
That's actually pretty sweet combo because right? I think that's exactly what, I mean, just right up the alley, classic horror films. Yeah. And so there's a bunch of interesting kind of background on this movie and some stuff that, came at the time and purportedly some other notable things that this one inspired. But like many other things that came out around this time, it really felt like a long episode of The Twilight Zone, didn't it? Yeah, I feel like I run into this anytime I watch anything old that's like kind of like a mystery. Yeah, exactly. I just have that feeling. And to our listeners, I'm sure like if you listen for a minute, like that old Brycey is going to be a little biased anytime a movie reminds him of The Twilight Zone. Oh, same. That's just a special part in my heart. Yeah. It's just something I can't help it. I love this series so much. And if it reminds me, it's like, sweet. I can hang with it. But yeah, it absolutely did. Yeah. So I also obviously very biased towards the movie because of that. But yeah, I enjoyed revisiting it. It had been several years since I watched it last, so it was nice to come back. I had forgotten a lot of it, but it was fun. And I think that it did some things that are not normal for a haunted house movie. So we talked before in our slasher miniseries about how the thing that really made Scream work and be interesting was the way that it kind of like played into the tropes of the genre, but also played around with your expectations because of that. And it was like kind of smart in the way that it did it. And I feel like this movie absolutely did that, but for haunted houses. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I was going to try to add something, but no, I mean, you're absolutely right. It played us like a fiddle, Daniel. I got played. Yeah. I'm not too proud to admit it. Yeah.
But anyway, this was an early one. I know there were other haunted house movies that sort of became popular around this same time. So, like, there was the Alfred Hitchcock movie Rebecca in 1940 that I know shows up in a lot of lists as like an early example of a haunted house movie. But I feel like that was really a little bit more, I don't know, before it was as defined as a genre. But it was one of the things that kind of helped, like in the early days, like make haunted house movies possible.
Yeah.
And so this one, I feel like really took some of the existing perceptions of like what you would expect in a haunted house movie and did them well, and then also had kind of some of its own twists that made it interesting. And so that's kind of why I went with this one over that one. And there are some other, early ones too. But it is funny, like by today's standards. Like next week we're going to talk about Amityville Horror, and just like comparing that movie to this one. This one seems almost like whimsical by comparison, but at the same time you got to think about things like the Hays Code and movies not really being able to be as like graphic or dark or violent as they would become later. And so one thing that stands out to me about some of these early movies is that they really do have to rely a lot more, I think, on like the story and the suspense and the plot to keep you engaged. And that's one thing that I think this one did well. So
yeah.
But one thing that I think we found kind of repeatedly as we've been doing these mini runs of episodes on specific subgenres is that it feels like something just kind of gets in the air once in a while, and then it makes it catch on, and then there's like a pivotal movie, but sometimes there's like books or Broadway shows or something around the same time. And another thing that I think is really notable is that this movie came out in 1959, as did Shirley Jackson's book, The Haunting of Hill House.
Interesting.
Yeah, right? So there was, I feel like, something around that time that made people like open and receptive to this type of story, or the idea of like the ghosts in a house and like humans coming into contact with that. And so I think that may be something that, there were some larger things. Like none of these movies that we talk about ever come out of a complete vacuum. And so, in thinking like what would people at the time be thinking about of a haunted house, it's like something was in the air,
Yeah, that's a good call. Very good point.
But anyway, I'll do the intro, and then do you have any fun facts for this one?
Yeah, one or two.
Cool. Then you can do those. And then we will get into the dissolving details.
Perfect.
In 1959, Allied artists brought us House on Haunted Hill. This movie tells the story of an eccentric millionaire, played by Vincent Price, who throws a party in a haunted house and offers $10,000 to any guest who can stay there through the night. House on Haunted Hill was made on an estimated budget of $200,000 and brought in about $2.5 million at the box office. It can currently be streamed for free on Tubi. What did you learn about this movie?
I love Tubi, man. It's also on Prime, for the record, too. And I use Prime because I get facts from it, You know that trick? They tie into IMDb.
Nice.
So yeah, I go cheap. Hey, so the Enos Brown house, it's based in Los Angeles. And the reason why I point this out, did you know who it was designed by?
I do, but only because I also read that fact.
Did you? Frank Lloyd Wright. Anyway, in this film, they were given $10,000 if they can last all night, right?
Yes.
I was given that once. And that would have equaled to around $100,000 now.
That definitely adds some perspective.
It definitely does, doesn't it? Yeah.
I would be a lot more likely to stay in a haunted house overnight for $100,000 than I would for $10,000.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good. No, I don't know, man. I'd still do it, but still, yeah, I'm just gonna stick it to those facts.
All right, I got one more for you.
This is Elvira's favorite horror film of all time.
No.
Oh, it was though.
I believe it. I was actually going to say that According to Wikipedia, Alfred Hitchcock took notice of the low-budget film's performance at the box office and made his own low-budget horror film, which became the critically acclaimed hit Psycho in 1960.
I read that fact wrong. That's funny. Okay. That's awesome. I'm glad you also clarified that. Yeah. I thought I'm just dumb as hell.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's just like small world, right? It ties back into what we were talking about before. And it's also funny to me that Alfred Hitchcock had previously made the haunted house movie Rebecca and then proceeded to be inspired by this haunted house movie to make Psycho. And it's just like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Small world.
Nuts.
But another thing I wanted to talk about, I had kind of like another fun fact, but it fits into like the larger question that we talked about in the beginning of like, what techniques is the director using to create fear? And I think the things that really stand out to me about this movie is that it went out of its way to try and involve the audience. So it was interesting to me that in the beginning you had Pritchett. I think Pritchett was his name, but he's the one whose brother had owned the house previously before being murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And in the beginning, he's just looking at you, like talking to the audience about the history of this house. And then it cuts to Vincent Price, who is doing like the same thing. And so from the very beginning, it's almost like they're inviting you to be in on the joke. Like you're overseeing what's happening inside the house. And neither of them would have any reason to like lie to you about anything. And so as the movie goes on, at the end, you'll remember pivotal scene with a skeleton in the basement. At the time, when this was in theaters, they used, I'll just read it. The film is perhaps best known for a promotional gimmick used in the film's original theatrical release called Emergo. In some theaters that showed the film, exhibitors rigged an elaborate pulley system near the theater screen, which allowed a plastic skeleton to be flown out over the audience during a corresponding scene late in the film. So, not only were they like breaking the fourth wall and like talking to the audience in the beginning, they were actually like using props in the theater in connection with the movie. And then one other thing I noticed is a technique they used a lot was like you would see a thing happening before a character did. Like someone would come up behind them or like an arm would reach out behind them or something. And all of that was really to kind of build this feeling that you were aware of more than the characters in the movie were. And we talked last time about that being kind of a core thing in haunted house movies. And a lot of times you as the viewer have a lot more knowledge of what's happening than the people in the house. Like even going all the way back to House of the Devil where, you know, the characters are looking at like the place where the bench was that disappeared, or you see like the devil with the pitchfork coming up behind them or whatever. And I think that that's really like kind of a core tenet of how these movies work, in that they build dread in you on behalf of the character. And that's like, it's interesting to me that this movie like doubled down on that feeling by like explicitly reaching out to you as an audience member in the beginning to like build that attitude.
Yeah, I actually kind of wonder where this could have come from, but no, I mean, I like the aspect of like kind of being brought into it at the beginning because it was mission accomplished for me. Like when I started watching this and he was, you know, it was right there. First off, I was like, man, this is already kind of a little creepy. Just guys staring at me. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think it was mission accomplished. And I think it's almost a bummer in a way how we kind of think about, I'm going to say how I think about like horror films. Like, you know how I've gotten frustrated in the past. Like, why are you going upstairs? Wait, well, because I'm not thinking like they're not supposed to know, like we're seeing something that they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. That's a very, very cool way of watching the film. And just a cool idea that they put all together. And I'm really glad that you mentioned the Emargo fact, because I had read that also and was like, what an awesome prank. Coming from a guy who worked at the movie theater, I would have loved to have seen something like that happen in real life. Like just to definitely see how they would have acted towards it, you know?
It's just fun, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, that's just a cool idea that will make you always remember going to that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I definitely am a huge fan of creative stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess kind of going back to our questions, like, why are the people stuck in the house? And I feel like this one had one of the more unique takes on that, is everyone was there because they needed money and someone was offering them money to stay.
Yeah.
And then they became trapped after that. So it's like totally plausible that if someone was offering me $100,000 in today's money to stay in a haunted house overnight, I would like not immediately leave. And then if the doors got locked early before I really even had a chance to make the decision, then yeah, you're just stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And at a time when no one had cell phones, that's all a really realistic premise.
Right. That's very realistic. Nothing you could really do about it. I'd just stick it out.
Yeah.
I'd just go hide.
Yeah.
Especially since cameras weren't a thing back then, you know, like in-house cameras, like the, just go hide.
Yeah.
You know what happened? I'd fall asleep and snore and I'd get caught. Because I'm not worried about the ghost aspect of this. I'm worried about the people being locked in with people I don't know.
Yeah. Especially when they hand out guns as party favors. That was kind of a twist, wasn't it?
I mean, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah. There's the way they pull out the coffins full of guns.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's all good. I brought my own. It's all good.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was amazing. But this movie did definitely give me some, I guess, like, it made me appreciate a couple of tropes that I hadn't really thought of. So one is that in haunted house movies, doors close and are temporarily locked. So it's like the ghost closes the door and then you can't open it. I feel like that's the thing we're going to see in pretty much every movie we watch over the next few weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one is like long outside shots of the house at night. I feel like we're going to see a lot of that too, which was kind of funny to me just because I hadn't really stopped to think about those two things being super characteristic of haunted house movies. But those are as much tropes of this genre as like all the rules were for slashers.
Yeah. Because you guys see what they're getting themselves into. There is something to say about like seeing those classic houses. And I know Psycho isn't necessarily considered a haunted house film, but like I feel like that maybe that's where like I just love to see like these old looking houses, like even around Halloween, like when you just see like houses that are like decked out, I'm just like, man, that's awesome. Like I just just adds to like the creepy feeling of what's going on. It's, you know, there's just something about haunted houses that I feel like is just in humans to find interest, like they're just interested in them, you know, the unknown, the excitement that you get when you're like kind of, I don't know, like you're not doing anything wrong, but you just feel like you kind of are, you feel maybe like in danger or something. I don't know. It's just kind of just like the feeling. And so when I say like Halloween film, that's what I kind of mean. And I feel like this movie fits into that category as far as, you know, it just checks all the boxes. First off, black and white. Love it. Second, haunted houses. Love it. Third, you get guns when you walk in. Love it.
Yeah, right. Well, in general, I mean, there was just a lot of stuff going on in this one that was very kind of traditional, I guess, for a haunted house. I mean, just like the plastic skeleton and I guess it was like the old woman ghost that slid around and stuff. And then,
which I thought was super creepy in itself. Yeah. Just like the look of her. Yeah. It's like, goodness, come on, lady, you look creepy. Yeah. But I also noticed in one of the scenes where she was like going, like she went through the door and like she went around, like she went like around the door that was open. So like it was open kind of at an angle and she kind of go around it. I was like, oh, that's hilarious to think like their technology.
There was no
so
visual
bad.
effect to make
They're
it look
so
like she could go through the door. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, there were several scenes where they used that. Like there was the one with, I think it was Nora was in the small room by herself, like knocking on the wall. And then she turns around and that ghost was just like there.
Oh yeah.
That was like a jump scare. That was like a 1959 jump scare, man. I loved it.
Yeah, for sure.
And then there was the scene where she found that like hallway that was blocked off by the curtains, and she parts them and starts to walk forward, and it's like dark and shadowy, and the camera is kind of like following right behind her. And then shortly after, you see that hand reach out for her just before she realizes it's there.
Oh yeah.
And that was great. Like that was so perfect in the setup and the suspense of that scene. And then you saw it happening right before she saw it to react to it. So you just had that complete dread on her behalf.
Right.
I thought that was really, really well done for a like very like technical setup of the scene. Like it wasn't like super special effects. It wasn't like something that was really visually striking. It was just like really good kind of suspenseful filmmaking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's, I think the struggle with some of these older films is like, is it so iconic or is it was it just so well put together? Did they put thought in like that scene that you just explained was my favorite scene of the film, but also like that's a prime example of like just thought being put into a film. I'm definitely not saying I could do better. I'm just saying like they did the math on that and it worked, you know?
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot, there was one more trope that I wanted to add, and that is the twisting doorknob, and then you open the door and no one's there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was another one that I think we'll see come back in the next few weeks.
Yeah, that's hands down, it has to. That's just part of the rules. I mean, I feel like.
But again, I mean, like we talked about last week, I feel like there are a lot of things about that are like tropes of the haunted house subgenre that don't take a lot of special effects and that don't age poorly. I mean, like all of that stuff that we've talked about in this movie is creepy, and you don't need really over the top special effects to pull it off. It's like just establish a scene and then throw in these really like kind of subtle, tense moments, and it's that unknown of the what's about to happen. It could be anything that's really terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, and here's the thing too, I don't know this, I'm just kind of guessing, but I also think that like I love The Haunting of Hill House, that movie, or the Netflix show that came out.
Season 1. Just to be
Season clear. 1, very, very clear. Thank you very much for that. Season 1 was just spectacular. Things in the background. And I catch myself comparing some of these films to The Haunting of Hill House, but not in a bad way. Like it's almost like I could see the influence, you know, from a TV show in the, 2020-ish years, whenever that was. I just think it's awesome because it's like they use some of these examples that we have talked about in this for this film, you know, like 80 years later, you know, or however long. It just blows. I guess 70. It just blows your mind. Like, but I think it's like enhancing my opinion on haunted house films. Like I really do. I've watched a few and it's like I'm just enjoying them so much more. And, you know, my thing when I watch these films is, you know, I like to put myself in their shoes. And that's why I kind of think like Home Invasion or like the slashers are a little bit more scary because it's like I feel like sometimes that could be more realistic than Ghost. Mm-hmm. But it's not the case at all. Like when we were doing this section, I thought to myself, like, okay, I'm going to have to, you know, get in the zone for these or whatever.
Power through it.
Yeah. But no, it's not the case. I'm actually just even more excited to watch them. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's been almost like refreshing a little bit, I think. And I think part of that too is like picking movies that we hadn't both already seen a million times, but it's been fun.
Or heard like 1,000 things about them.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, granted, I mean, even when we were talking about what we're going to do for these haunted house films, like I was getting these movies mixed up. Just like, no, we've done House on Haunted Hill. No, we've done Haunted Hill House or whatever it was. But yeah, it was definitely been pretty exciting. It's been an exciting start. I even went back and rewatched the short that we did for our last episode.
Oh yeah.
Just to watch it again. It's just, and also like you can't hate how long it took them to film. It was like an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, I guess so like we still had two questions on like the things we're going to pay attention to.
Yeah.
One is, well, they're kind of tied, but one is like, what is the source of danger? And the other is, how are the people being affected? And I think I wanted to save those till the end so that we could talk about like sort of the grand reveal of this movie. And that is that the millionaire's wife and her boyfriend, who was one of the party invitees, were actually planning the whole thing as a way to get someone else to kill the millionaire so that the wife could inherit his money and run away with the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But the millionaire knew that the whole time and kind of turned the tables on them and then ended up murdering them.
Mm-hmm.
But then also Pritchett maintains that there are ghosts in the house and that now there are two more. And then, he ends like, they're like the creepy sound effects from the beginning, and he's saying they're coming for me now and they'll come for you too. So that was like the final, I guess, kind of, break the fourth wall, talk to the audience moment. What was your assessment of this movie? Do you think that you were meant to think that there were no ghosts at any point, or that there were ghosts, they just weren't the most dangerous things in the house?
So I would say up until we find out that the doctor, or until we find out what was going on, I would say it was 100% haunted.
Yeah.
After, I have no idea. I was hoping that you would clarify that for me. I mean, I promise, like that was my thought going into this. I was like, I don't know. Like, did they ever explain the lady ghost?
No.
So then it must have been at least a little haunted.
Unless she was a prop.
Right. But yeah.
Oh. But my thinking on it though is like I feel like there were too many things that you couldn't have explained with him. Like
he would have had in too many rooms at once.
Yeah. Like when the guy who was, I think he was a pilot, went into that one room and then he like came out and he had the wound on his head. Like they never showed, people being able to get into and out of that room that I saw. And they were just down like in the basement alone together. And then what was the other one? Oh, there was the creepy stuff where like the chandeliers would randomly move or like the lights would blow out and stuff. And then there was the thing like where the guy's doorknob was turning. And so there were a number of kind of creepy things in the movie that they never like really explained. So I think maybe the house was haunted or it was at least creepy on its own, in addition to the stuff that they were doing. But I haven't really I didn't really dig into trying to read about it because I thought it would be more fun just to talk to you about it.
Yeah. No, I think that's, I think there had to have been something going on with the house itself. Just for the people to like agree to it. I feel like if I just pull, I don't know, $10,000 or $100K nowadays, like I would, if someone was like, hey, you guys stay in this house overnight and it's haunted, I wouldn't really even ask. I may do research before.
Yeah.
But I would just think like it would be kind of like a known, like, yeah, that's the house.
It was on Ghost Hunters.
Yeah, something like that. But I don't know. And here's the thing. I don't know if we need to know to make, I think that, I think that's also the beauty of the film. It's hard to say this without a smile on my face of like, I just like the fact that movie that came out in the 50s is still having us talk about it, or having us try to figure that out.
Yeah, I feel like the ending made it creepier. Like it made you less certain about what you knew about the movie, which is something I kind of like. And I think that it didn't necessarily close the door on, the house being haunted. It definitely left that possibility open, but it also revealed that, like, oh yeah, people are shitty and scary too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, overall, I thought this one was really good. I think that this is a very classic entry in, if you wanted to explain to someone, what is a classic platonic ideal of a haunted house movie, this is one that could go on the list.
No, absolutely. Yeah. It has to be on the list. This is one of my favorites, dude. I fell in love with it.
It's only like 70 minutes, so even better.
Oh man, you know how much stuff you can do after that? You can watch the first short that we did probably about 60 times. Did you?
I'm not going to do enough math to try and figure out what that means, but
trust me, I did it in my head. It works.
So yeah, off to a good start. I'm excited to get further along in this realm. Next week, we're going to be back with Amityville Horror, which oddly enough, we hadn't ever watched, which feels weird given the podcast and main hobby that we have, which is watching horror movies, and it's kind of classic. So excited to come back and talk to you about that and continue our journey into the world of haunted house movies.
I mean, we've only watched like 1,000 freaking horror movies for this podcast. We're going to miss one. Yeah. Hey, but I got 2 questions for our listeners.
Okay.
If you've seen this film, do you think that the house was still haunted?
Oh, good question.
Yeah. And the second, what would you do for $10,000?
100,000.
No.
Actually, my better question might 10.
Be. I got things I need done.
Better question might be, what wouldn't you do for 10,000?
That's a good point.
Like, what are your limits?
Yeah. I need to know what you will and won't do for $10,000.
thehorrificpod@gmail.com. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.